Testing, testing.
Yep.
Okay.
Looks like we got three of us on. Let's wait for another.
Okay.
Did Dr. Schmerlin, AJ, or
Miss
Shantae confirm?
Miss Brody just confirmed, and I have not heard from the other two yet.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Christina, are you able to display the agenda for today?
Yes, there you go.
Thank you. We'll give it another 2 or 3 minutes and then we'll get started.
Okay. Um, I will say quickly, Miss Hoffman, I know you indicated we wanted to wait for Miss Ward, Miss Addison Ward, to join us for the SPED contract. So let me know if she's not here. We'll go to the calendar first before we hit the SPED contracts. I think she's in another meeting and she will join us as soon as she can.
That's correct, Christina.
Okay, so just let me know if she's on screen because for some reason I can't see the. Oh wait, here we go.
We'll get started in another minute here.
Okay.
All right. I think we should get started in the essence of time. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to April 4th, 2024's Committee of the Whole. On the line with me are fellow board members Francois Ledger and board member Walker. We're waiting for others to join us. We also have members from the district leadership team on the call as well. We have a very robust agenda, so I do not want to delay any longer, and we'll get started. I do know that we have a slight switch in order of the agenda, and I believe we're going to be discussing the calendar first. Is that correct?
Oh, sorry. Apologies for the misunderstanding. No, we will go through the financial results first, then Parent Square, and then if Miss Ward, who doesn't works with the special ed department, is not on the call by then we will jump to the calendar.
All right. So we'll start off with item 1.1, financial results through January 2024. I'll turn it over to, I believe, Mr. Foster.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. And apologies for my video. I'm actually between locations and my internet is a little bit sketchy. Hopefully you can hear me all right. So as you see on the screen, you've got the financial results through January. So that's through period 7 months out of our year. And I will just hit the high points and certainly am available to answer questions. Through the end of January, we had spent $211 million. We did have a big increase in January from the month of December of $44 million in spending compared to the same period in the previous year. That's largely because of our work to spend down our ESSER funding. So there was a significant amount of spending relative to the ESSER grants. So that's why the big jump from the year-over-year comparison. As I've shared in previous months, we're continuing to track items that are trending above budget. The two that I'll highlight today, the fringe benefits are continuing to track over budget. And I think I had shared in our last monthly update that some of our fringe costs are fixed regardless of the number of staff we have. And so because of our continuing vacancy rate, we charge our fringe costs against actual salaries. And so if we have vacancies, the amount we're able to charge for fringe goes down, causing us to be a little bit over budget on fringe. And then tuition continues to show up significantly over budget. And so that remains a concern relative to the balancing the fiscal year at the end of the year. I know I talked about this some last month, but the ongoing mitigation steps we're taking to come in with a balanced budget by the end of the fiscal year includes a hiring freeze, which I talked about last month, not impacting classroom positions, but impacting central office and positions outside classrooms. We have done budget sweeps, so that's pulling back funding that hasn't been used in the way that it was intended during the fiscal year. The other thing I'll highlight today is that our requisition deadline is coming up on Monday. So that's the last date when schools and departments can put in for purchases. And so in the next several weeks, we're going to have a much better picture of our any 23-24 fiscal year deficit that we're projecting, because we're going to have a sense of how much is still in the budget that hasn't been encumbered after our requisition deadline on Monday. And then if we move to the ESSER update, which is several pages in, you do have the attachments with the sort of line by line detail relative to the budget. In terms of our relief grant spending, we continue to be on track. We're actually at 3/4 of our ESSER spending, or 73.5% of the ESSER 3 ARP expended. And we're actually, as a district, we've spent 83% of the $155 million that we received in COVID relief grant money. I just want to highlight the fact that as of the end of December, the average district in Connecticut had spent 52% of their COVID relief grant money. So we're well ahead of the average in Connecticut in terms of ensuring we've been effectively and efficiently using those resources so that we don't leave money on the table. And you can see we have about 26 million remaining that is not spent or encumbered. But as we've talked about in previous conversations, there is a significant chunk of that is still committed, because we have positions that are funded with COVID relief dollars and we don't encumber salary. And so the funding that will pay for those positions, we will continue to expend as each pay period passes between now and the end of the year. And as you know, for our 10-month staff, we pay them through the summer. And so we actually have 4 pay periods in July and August, where we'll continue to pay each pay period for our 10-month employees on the ESSER dollars. So even though it shows 26 million, a significant chunk of that is committed to continuing to pay for the positions that are funded through COVID relief dollars. And with that, I am happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I'm looking at the screen to see if my colleagues have any questions for Mr. Foster. I do have one question. So you mentioned in terms of the COVID spend down, are we on track? I mean, I know I think you said 80 something percent. Are we comfortable that, right, we'll be at 100% at the time of whatever the spend down expiration date is?
Yes, I'm very comfortable. In fact, I'd like to have a little bit more than what we have remaining, to be honest. As you know, we had in our budget that we adopted for 23-24, we assumed the use of some of the remaining ESSER to help balance this current fiscal year, and we are projecting to use what is remaining to help cover some eligible costs in 24-25 during the months of July, August, and September before the funding expires on September 30th. And so we will absolutely use every bit of it to help mitigate the challenge we're facing in the 24-25 fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Walker.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Deputy Superintendent Foster, the question is about that 3.2 mil overrun in the fringe, and it's about well, you talked about some mitigation ideas. I wanted to ask, maybe with an eye towards the future, if you're envisioning a better way of linking up fringe payments to staff levels, because every year we're going to have some vacancies, and it feels like that'll be existing next year as well. So, any thoughts about how that gap will be closed so next year we won't have that type of overage?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I appreciate that. I think it's something that's worth looking at. You know, the current practice and the practice that we've had is, you know, we apply a fringe percentage rate to the salaries, but, you know, and it's based on, you know, our actual costs relative to things like health insurance and other benefits that we provide. And so it really becomes a question, do we sort of somewhat over budget for fringe, or, you know, do we attempt to, you know, in some way budget against, you know, all of the budgeted positions as opposed to the actuals? Because the way we do it now is monthly. We essentially charge ourselves for the fringe costs for our existing employees as a percentage of the salary that was paid out. And so I will certainly take that as a takeaway. So do we just sort of, you know, add a placeholder amount in that budget line to try to mitigate this, you know, consistently? But I'll take that as a follow-up.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate either meeting with you or hearing back on that. The reason I'm asking, because as everyone's looking at our budget cuts and they're talking about how much we could get with this or that money, I just can't imagine in the future if we throw out that we have a few $1 million that we didn't have to spend. So it'd be great to see the approaches. So I look forward to see your ideas in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I want to see if Ms. Ledger has a question.
No, I do not have a question at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Porter, is there anything else that you would like to share with the committee?
No, I think that's it for the monthly report.
Awesome. Thank you. Next item, contract approval for Parent Square.
Yes, and we have Mr. Jesse Sugarman on the call for this.
Thank you, Ms. Santiago. Good evening, everyone. This is a renewal for our contract with Parent Square. I think most folks on the call are familiar, but just for those who are not, Parent Square is our communications platform, two-way communications platform between the district, schools, teachers, and other personnel, and our families. This will be entering the third year of the contract with Parent Square. Parent Square allows for, again, two-way communication in the user's preferred language. It does sync with PowerSchool on a nightly basis. So as contact information is updated in PowerSchool, it's automatically updated in Parent Square. That also includes a user's preferred language. So it will default to that unless the user selects something otherwise in Parent Square. Again, the user also, it is an opt-out tool. So all of our families are opted into Parent Square. They are allowed to determine which method of communication they prefer. So that could be email, that could be text, that could also be utilizing the Parent Square app. Our most popular form of communication for our families is text, followed by email, and then, of course, the application. Parent Square allows us to send urgent alerts. So in the event of a school closure or an emergency that's going on at one of our schools, we can send an alert. We can override a digest setting, which is a user's ability to get messages later in the day. We can override that. And when an event like that happens, communication goes out on all channels, not just on the user's preferred, to make sure that they do receive important informations. This is the tool that our teachers use to relay important information, report cards. They can also use forms, permission slips. The cost for this this year is just north of $90,000, $90,122. It is based on student enrollment. And then the two different pieces that we have in Parent Square is the Engage, and then also the Forms platform. The last thing I would note is that Parent Square has exceptional customer service. They've done a really good job of offering boot camps for any teachers or staff that want to take advantage of that. They host webinars. They have office hours that our team has taken advantage of to try to figure out best practices. They've also been encouraging in terms of coming up with new ways to use the technology. And the last thing I would note is that there's a new tool coming on board next year called Studio Editor that will be included in this cost. It's essentially free of charge. And that is something that would help us in developing news posts and newsletters for the district. Ms. Santiago is showing the various platforms and details that are associated with each sort of form of the platform. I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah, I guess, and thank you, Mr. Sugarman. Real quick, I think just as a best practice, I guess, who is like the competition to Parent Square? Have we done a comparison to make sure that Parent Square is still right, kind of best in class as well as cost effective? And then more importantly, I think you had mentioned that that they are good. I'm wondering, do they do any type of surveying of the parents that are actually using the tool to get feedback and so forth? So if you could address those questions, that'd be great. And I do see Ms. Ledger followed by Mr. Walker after you address those topics.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start. So internally, we do a Parent Square as a part of our culture and climate survey. And so the user satisfaction is typically like 90 to 91% that have positive feelings about the platform. There are, 5 to 6% that are sort of neutral, but really low disapproval rate, only about 3%. So our families that reply to the survey, do feel strongly about it. Also, I would say that the various teams internally that use Parent Square feel that it's an intuitive, it's an easy platform to use. The competition, I guess I'll name two. Classroom Dojo is another communication platform. Some of our classes will layer this on because Classroom Dojo has a behavior component to it where you can award points. In terms of a communication platform, it is not as easy to use. I'm a parent and I see Classroom Dojo as a user from the other side. It is not as easy to use as Parent Square is. So I would say that would be my comparison with those two. The other comparison would be with a platform called Rooms. Now our website is run with a company called Aptogee. Rooms is their platform. And so we were interested in sort of researching that and seeing if that would be something that we would want to add on because we already use Aptogee in another capacity. There's not much cost savings there, if at all. And also the amount of training necessary would sort of be counterproductive, especially at this point for our families. So I think with the high ratings and the fact that it would be essentially a cost neutral switch, we felt like Parent Square was the appropriate place to go this year. Oh, and you also asked about surveys that Parent Square conducts. So they do. And I would say in terms of the scale that Parent Square has nationally, we have a rep that we work with who's our customer service person. We are able to go to him and ask him, hey, this district, what did they do to talk about early childhood literacy? What did they do to talk about this? And sometimes we get really good, practical answers that we can then use. Other times they say, no one's asked that question, but we're happy to work with you to pilot one of those things and figure out how we can sort of optimize. So I guess that would be, I don't know if that satisfies your answer, if I missed anything.
No, thank you. That's helpful. Ms. Ledger followed by Board Member Walker.
Thank you so much. And thank you for that presentation. I don't really have a question. I just wanted to say that I use Parent Square both as a parent for Hartford Public Schools for my child who's in the Hartford Public School system. And I use Parent Square as an educator for the district that I work for rather, and as a teacher. And it's nice because I can just with one click, I can go from my, as a teacher, in one district to Hartford as a parent. And it's, it lists the classes. It's very user friendly. I'm able to, like you were able to, talk about briefly, Jesse, about, sending notifications out, and, you can determine like, a delayed, not a response, but when you want to send it out, like a release time or whatever. And the alerts are great. I can see report cards. I can send report cards. So I'm very happy with it, and I've never had a problem with it. And I'm not the most technologically savvy person, but I appreciate Parent Square. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Board Member Walker?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Sugarman, I want to lift up, I guess, Classroom Dojo. And it's not so much to replace Parent Square. It's that there are teachers who are still advocates for Classroom Dojo, and I guess pulling out their own pocket, they still use Classroom Dojo and find it to be advantageous for engaging parents in the way that they do. And so I'm wondering, one, can we find ways to support those teachers in the sense of if the idea is to actually reach parents in the way they want to be reached, it appears that some subset of parents and teachers who like using Classroom Dojo. Right now we have the one size fits all with Parent Square. So is it possible that those teachers get the ability to have some marginal license fee paid so they can use Classroom Dojo in addition to Parent Square as their communication tool with parents?
I don't know that I can speak to the financial component of that. I would just say I think there's a real advantage in using one communication platform, so that if there is a crisis or an emergency, parents know exactly where to look to find that information. Those teachers who have opted to layer on Classroom Dojo, I would just say with the most, in the most polite way I could, that was their decision to include that. I do think that there are other ways that they could incorporate some of the features of Classroom Dojo. I would be happy to offer training on those. But in terms of additional money, I don't think that's appropriate. Although I do appreciate their ability to sort of navigate, unique ways to reach their teachers. I just think it's critically important that there's one communication platform for the district.
Thank you. Board Member Brody?
Sorry for my lateness. Did we discuss at all? I'm assuming from what I've heard so far that we did not put out an RFP for it. We're choosing Parent Square.
I could answer that question, Mr. Chair. So,
Yeah.
Ms. Brody, there was not an official RFP due to renewal and somewhat of a sole source, but we did get a bid from another provider, and there was no real cost savings, and the amount of training that would have been required, would have essentially negated any savings if there were any, actually. So we did compare to a few other providers.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Is that our natural process that on renewals we don't put out RFPs?
I don't know if I'm necessarily qualified to answer that question in terms of like city
Okay.
government.
I just want to know it, not even if it's not right now. I want to know that question because I asked the same question last committee of the whole, last board meeting. I think we were discussing some other contract. I think it was Power School. So I want to know on renewals, do we just say is a renewal and we go get other prices, but we might not put an RFP out? I just want to know our process. Thank you.
Board Member Ledger? Board Member Ledger? Okay, we'll come back. Board Member Walker?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Sugarman, I was going to follow up in a question, but I would I heard Miss Brody's comment, and I was going to volunteer here that there is a such thing as like sole source justification, and in the case as you suggest where you've determined that someone is just best value or whatnot, but potentially let's add to our process some way to talk about a sole source justification, and if we're not going to do the bidding as is suggested, then there should be some kind of sole source justification that says here's why we use this one source and so forth and so on. And you listed it, but that could be that added to our process. And so I'm throwing it on the table as you're doing this investigation to maybe come back with that additional, if we don't already have it. I'm assuming the city has it, so it may not even be you that has to do it. It may just be something that is part of the city procurement process. More of a comment. I'll let you respond.
Mr. Walker, yeah, I'm not necessarily, again, an expert on the city procurement process. I'm just sort of following in the chat on Ms. Santiago providing some of the information. So I think I would need to have someone else answer some of those questions. In terms of, sole source, it's something that I'm somewhat familiar with, but again, I'm not really confident to answer those questions here.
Thank you. I guess then I would just second Ms. Brody's action to, just come back with something, because it does keep coming up, this question of how we work renewals. So I realize you're not the expert in it, so it'll just be an action to take. Thank you.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify, it's not come back with something. I think it's come back with the process that's already in place from the city. That's what we're talking about here. So I just want to make sure that folks, for public assumption, that there isn't the notion that a new process is being created. Whether or not there needs to be more people knowledgeable of the process, this is what I'm hearing. I think Ms. Santiago put in the chat that there is a process in place, and looks like the district team here is going to Ms. Brody's request, just provide some type of schematic or workflow that captures that process.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I was being broad in my comment. No implication of a new anything.
Yep.
My statements talked about a city process. And so, yes, you're absolutely correct.
All right. Is there any other additional comments or questions regarding this agenda item? Again, I do want to acknowledge that we have Board Member Brody joining us as well as Board Member Johnson. So thank you. I believe we could move to the next agenda item. Seeing no hands, and that is contract approval. For
And my interjection.
Sure.
Sorry, it looks like Ms. Ward has not joined us yet. So as I said in the beginning, if you don't mind, we will jump to the calendar, item 2.7.
All right, we'll move to item 2.7, second reading for the 2024-25 district calendar. Turn it over to whoever's leading that discussion.
That would be Chief Barney.
You're on mute if you're looking to talk.
Yes, sorry. Good evening. Thank you. So this is the second reading of the calendar. Over the course of the process and development of the calendar, we have engaged all of the union membership. We had 700 plus respondents from the HFT. We had HPSA membership. We had students at the high school level. We also had capstone students that did their capstones around the calendar. Our district ACE team, departmental and cabinet feedback, over 400 plus families. were engaged in this process. After the Board of Ed meeting, we reached out to additional stakeholders across all of the groups for additional feedback, exploring the request for additional half days added back into the calendar. However, overall, the feedback was to keep the half days the same. The reason being is that families noted constraints with childcare, concerns with before and after school programming. Staff felt that the addition of the full day PLs, because if you look at the calendar, there are several full day professional learning days added in this calendar cycle. They're in January, November. They're also at the beginning of the school year as well. They felt that that was more beneficial to their practice, having the full day versus the half day. Our Wednesday also has the highest rates of chronic absenteeism, and our middle school and our high schools carry the brunt of that chronic absenteeism on the half days. And then we other stakeholders felt that with the balance between the half days and the full days, we would meet everyone's needs.
Ms. Barney, for my,
Yes.
excuse me, for my own knowledge, this calendar then has not changed since the board meeting? Is that?
It is
I mean,
not.
you've taken, okay, so you've taken into account the feedback and where your landing is by and large, there's no changes to the calendar. It looks like there's still, right, 2 weeks off in the for the Christmas holiday / New Year
Yes.
with Three Kings. There's also the observation of Juneteenth,
Yes.
right? Okay. Thank you. Looking to my colleagues to see if they have any questions.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I'm on my mobile device, so do you mind if I hop right in?
Please go ahead. And so Board Member Johnson, followed by Board Member Brody.
Yeah, no, I want to thank you, Ms. Barney, for just being diligent with this, and I appreciate the overall feedback from the community. I do understand that, you know, with everything that's going on with Fridays being a potential half day, I think I do understand the reasoning. I've also talked to a few young people, a few students, and they feel like, you know, absenteeism would be even higher if we do it on a Friday. You know, with the union, so forth and so on. Is there another day that would be considered outside of Wednesday? Not that I want to change it at this point, but I just want to see if there was any dialogue around potentially a number 2 day for professional development that works with staff, students, and family.
The only 2 days, Board Member Johnson, that were raised, just even in feedback when we did ask for open comment, were the Friday and the Wednesday. The other feedback that we did receive would be like in the future to how can we, and I think a board member mentioned this at the meeting, how can we look at like really reducing or eliminating the half day Wednesdays and then utilizing full day professional learning, because the half day is a struggle for staff, families, just with the constraints around childcare, et cetera, for both stakeholders.
Thank you. Board Member Brody?
Thank you. In regards to Juneteenth, the discussion last time the calendar was presented last year was if it could be a like it most likely may not be school on the 19th if we have a good winter. So are we able to not have it if schools reach the teens to have it there as opposed to the 19th on a day that school is likely going to be out? I think that's how we, for the first time we did the observance for it, I think that was the train of thought.
Yeah, Ms. Brody, I'll jump in here. I think when we had this conversation, at least what I remember is that we should treat it like July 4th. We're going to acknowledge it as a district holiday, and then if school happens to fall on that day, right, we will observe it. But if it doesn't, then I guess treat it like any other holiday that's happens in the summer, which is July 4th. I'm not sure, Miss Barney, if that's different than the rationale here.
No, I believe that that was the rationale. And I know that superintendent was going to further the discussions with the board around Juneteenth. Because I know it was raised, what is like to board member Brody's point, what does that look like if we're not in session for, you know, but we have 12-month employees working? So are we observing that as well? Which I believe that is the discussion.
Board Member Walker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, Ms. Barney, about the Wednesday, Friday, I can't see the full calendar. There was some question about moving professional development to Friday, and I think you said that professional development will stay on Wednesday with the half day Wednesday. Can you confirm that?
Yes, that is correct. Just based off of the feedback, would be, you know, even from the students during the board meeting, that is why we went back and just to garner some additional feedback, was that, you know, we wouldn't come to school on Friday. So the professional learning will remain on the Wednesdays.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that confirmation.
Are there any additional questions?
I do. So I'm not clear on, is this going to be voted on?
I believe so. So this is a second reading, and then we are voting on it.
Yeah, so I'm still not clear on my question. So is it a district holiday and if school falls on it, school is out, but the employees that are there, they're observing it? I don't know if we're clear on that answer.
Ms. Barney?
So yes, if we are in session on the 19th, as you know, to your point, if we have a year of snow, then yes, school would be closed and we would be observing the holiday.
If school is closed, are we still observing it for employees?
Yes.
Thank you.
Are there additional questions or comments? Ms. Curtis, it looks like you have your hand raised. I'm not.
Yes, I'm sorry. I just wanted to, Board Member Brody's question. I just wanted to be very clear that if school is in and it's a school holiday, it is a holiday for teachers, folks who work in schools, 10-month employees. So employees who are 12-month employees, we work even when school is out. So I just wanted to be clear about that. So if it's a school holiday, if we're calling it Chief Barney, are we calling it a school holiday or a district holiday? If the entire district is closed, then no one works. If it is a school holiday, which I think that's what we're labeling it, then only the 10-month employees who would normally get off for school holidays would be off that day.
So, Chief Curtis, thank you for that clarification. I guess, Ms. Barney, that begs the question, is this being viewed as a school or a district holiday?
The board would have to decide that, Board Member Rigger.
Okay, so let me backtrack. You guys will have to give us a proposal or a recommendation of what you're thinking. So what's the thinking here? Are you guys thinking it as a I guess that's part of the discussion here is like, okay, if you're thinking as a district holiday, why? If you think about a school holiday, why? Has those conversations taken place?
Hmm. Well,
Hold on, Mr. Walker. Had
I,
those conversations taken place?
so my recollection, we had this conversation last year when we costed it out and we provided the information to the board, is when there was the decision to make it a school holiday. So when it's a school holiday, which is what the board decided last year, then the school holiday only impacts the school calendar. When we because there's a cost associated to make it a district holiday when you're closing the entire district, and then the implications on all 12 of the collective bargaining agreements, because each collective bargaining unit bargains for each one of their holidays. So I think it's a broader well, I don't think it is a broader conversation if it is, if the board seeks to make it a district holiday. There are a lot more things to consider.
So I appreciate that. So, and I probably used the wrong terminology, district versus school. And when I meant, I meant kids were off and those personnel supporting the kids would be off as well. That was my understanding, but you kind of open it up saying it's up to the board to decide. Like I don't want to go down that path, especially if there are collective bargaining agreements in place that can be impacted. So I'm asking you again, like, what is it? Is it a district holiday or is it a school holiday?
So the board decided that it is a school holiday.
Thank you. Board Member Walker?
yeah, thank you. I wanted to join in this conversation. My recollection was last year we made a decision because while the governor had elevated Juneteenth to a state holiday, it officially wasn't enforced in the first year, and now it's officially a state holiday. And so I'm going to add to this conversation that we should look at some guidance as to how we treat other state holidays. And I can't speak for the unions, but I would hesitate, making Juneteenth a second tier holiday. If other state holidays are seen as district wide holidays, then Juneteenth should be seen the same. But without knowing all the agreements with unions, I can't make that unilaterally. But I do think we should understand that the decision initially was just around dealing with that 1 year transition. Now, I just think Juneteenth should be looked at as every other state holiday that we recognize. That's just my comment.
Thank you. Is there anyone that can speak to that? How we view other state holidays? Ms. Barney?
Yeah, so I did want to add to this that in my discussions with the superintendent, we have been discussing and she was going to bring to and propose to the district that we do switch this to a district-based holiday. So that way that to Dr. Curtis's point, all staff would have it off.
Okay, so now this is back to a district holiday.
Well, we would, she wanted to propose the change so that right now it would remain in here where all of, to Dr. Curtis's point, 10-month employees, so our teachers, our paraprofessionals, they would have that off. The change would only affect our 12-month employees, so central office folks. And so that's why we were going to have the discussions with the board coming up in the future to determine that change, but it would not affect schools or teachers at this point. It would just affect the 12-month employees.
Okay, so I'll be completely honest here. I'm somewhat lost in terms of what we're trying to figure out. So if the superintendent needs to propose something, it should have been proposed here. I'm somewhat reluctant to bring this forth if we don't know whether or not Juneteenth is a district or school holiday. Again, I know there are some implications with the union, so I just want to be very mindful of the current CBAs that are in place. This might require another round of discussion before this gets voted on, because again, I think there's some confusion here of how this is going to be actually executed. I think the spirit of what everyone's talking about is aligned, but again, the execution of this, there are some implications. Board Member Johnson.
Yeah, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, the discussion on this has been good. But I've actually been on the board long enough at this point to kind of track what Board Member Brody asked for. And I have to say that Board Member Brody has been very consistent year after year asking about this. And I just want to validate that. Again, I've been here year after year, and we've asked this question when Aisha was on the board. So I'm down for another round to explore. I don't see or foresee a union, if we have to go through that direction of just going through all that, I really don't see the unions. I would ask unions to bring their best offer forward to make sure.
Let's be mindful that no one here can speak for the unions, and that there is a collective bargaining agreement in place, and that we need to be mindful of that. So while I certainly appreciate those sentiments, if you want to move forward and vote on something that is in contrast to a CBA, by all means, we could do that. But I'm just providing guidance that it's probably best that we take our time to make sure that we're making the right decision here.
Yeah, no, certainly. I'm not disagreeing with you. All I'm saying is
okay.
I'm down to have the conversations to see what is possible, because again, this is something that a board member has asked, and I think it's worth the extra conversations. Thank you.
Board Member Walker.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I also was going to support Ms. Barney and Superintendent bringing the proposal forward. I recommend, we don't get too lost into the union negotiations. That's a process in and of itself. And while I'm mindful of it, our role would be to determine whether this holiday is worthy of district-wide recognition. And to me, I'm willing to support that. And then I will let other parties do the negotiating they have to do, because they can decide what year they want to recognize it and bring it as part of their CBA. But it appears that the first step has to be the board saying that it's worthy of being a district-wide holiday. And so I'm inviting Ms. Barney and the superintendent just to bring it forward, let us review it, and so forth. And Mr. Chair, if it requires an extra month, then so be it. But I'm just saying that
so we're clear, we're all saying the same thing, right? Like I understand everyone want to get their voice in. Right now, no proposal has been brought forth. The superintendent's not here to bring the proposal, and I'm simply saying we need more time to discuss it. So I'm somewhat getting a little confused of what we're talking about. We're saying the same thing. No one is not acknowledging that we need to, as I said, we need to treat Juneteenth like any other major holiday, like July 4th, which is what I said. And right now, what's been presented to me does not look like that. So where do we want to go here, folks? Help me understand.
So we're offering support to your position, Mr. Chair, and you're correct. We can't act on it today, which is going to be my final line. So if it needs to move to another month, then let's do that. I'm just inviting Ms. Barney to bring the proposal forward, because somehow that didn't happen. So yes, Mr. Chair, if it needs to go another month, then let's just do that.
Thank you. So Ms. Barney, I think you have next steps. And again, I think the conversation here is how can we make this a district holiday? again, being mindful of other moving components, but I think the wishes of the board is to treat this like any other major holiday. And again, I use July 4th and other state holidays as the barometer.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Santiago, thank you. What do we have next?
We have the special education contracts. They are all about staffing. So we have Ms. Jennifer Hoffman on the call as well as Ms. Allison Ward, and they have prepared to make it easier this slide deck here. So Ms. Hoffman or Ms. Ward, I'm not sure who's speaking first.
Good evening. I can go ahead and talk. Is the deck up or?
Yes.
Yes. I can't see it. Hold on a second. Apologize. There we go. So if you could go ahead and just go to the next slide, that would be great. And so we're bringing forth several of the contracts that are already in place. We have the CT Behavioral Health, our Stepping Stone, which is focuses on speech and language and some para support. Soliant, which looks at speech and language. It has given us a special ed teacher and in the past a school psychologist. We have AMN. We're looking to continue with them. That's all speech and language. And then we have CBS, which is also speech and language, which we currently have. You want to keep going? There we go. Oh, oops, perfect. Okay, so this kind of gives you the breakdown of what we're looking for. Much of it is exactly what we have in place now. So CBS therapy, we're looking to continue our 8.5 FTEs, and that is all speech and language. They do a really nice job of finding a speech and language pathologist that stay with the district for several years as we need them. And then Stepping Stone, we are actually looking to increase that by 5 FTEs for speech and language. We've had some speech and language pathologists leave the district. We've had some retirements that are coming. We currently have a couple of teacher retiree hires that will no longer be able to do that with us for this coming school year. So we thought Stepping Stone does a really, really nice job of always finding us whatever FTE we ask for them. They do a really nice job of helping us with that. Also in that contract is the 40 para educators that we are currently using with them. And that is just to help us be able to hire para educators. And they are all filled. If we need to replace them, they replace them for us. They do a really nice job of finding us the people that support there's 40 of them currently, 28 of which are within our most specialized programs. And then the other ones are within the schools. We have Soliant, which we're looking to continue with them. They do, the person who's been the speech and language pathologist has been with us for a few years, as well as the special education teacher. Connecticut Health is a contract that we utilize to hire BCBA support throughout the district, as well as RBT, which is a registered behavior technician that works alongside the BCBA. And those are throughout all of our schools. When students are struggling and staff are struggling with some behaviors, they can ask for help and they come in and help out with that. And then we have our AMN Health, which we brought on this year, and we're asking to continue with the 6 FTEs with them as well. They currently, I think we have 5 currently filled with them. All of the funding comes from fundings that are already in place. So any speech and language pathologist is already in the budget for the buildings, as well as the para educators. And then the behavioral health one is actually in the IDEA grant. We obviously, for speech and language, will continue to try to hire our own. We do as much recruiting as we can, as well as looking for them to come, I'm constantly looking through Nimble to see if anyone has applied. It's just, again, another shortage area nationally for us. I think that sums up our requests to continue our current contracts.
Okay, we have board member Brody, followed by board member Walker.
Thank you. For the life of me, cannot understand how these organizations find the people. We can't find the people. It makes no sense to me. Two, why aren't we writing in our agreement with the company we're using to find us people to say, yes, 1 year they'll temp, in the next year we can hire them as our own employees? Like, I thought we put that in place with some things that we do. Like, we can't say it's a national shortage. We can't, because we find them through the temp agency. There's no reason why we should not be having our own staff, and they're finding them, but we can't find them. This makes no sense to me. I'm trying to like really figure it out. But so I guess the question would be, why aren't we writing in our contract with this temp agency to say we have them for so many months and then we have the option of hiring them as our employee? Why aren't we doing that?
So one of the, so for speech and language, I'm going to talk directly about them. Many of them are teletherapists, so they are in other states. They're able to look nationally for them and be able to hire outside of just Connecticut. Hartford, we do not hire teletherapists currently. I mean, I guess that's something that we could talk to OTM about, and whether or not in the future that would be something we could do. But currently we do not hire teletherapists directly through Hartford Public Schools. And that is why the speech and language pathologist can be found, because they're doing a national search for them. And they're not, like, they can stay where they live.
The others?
As far as putting into the contract of hiring them after, we wouldn't be able to hire them because they're not in Connecticut.
You said that for that particular
for speech and language.
But what about the other? It's like a few different. This is not just speech and language. You mentioned subs, and you mentioned paraeducators and others.
Yep. Sure, absolutely. So the BCBA, the behavioral health BCBA, we currently utilize an outside agency to hire BCBA because they are very hard to find a BCBA that is also certified as either a special education teacher and or a social worker. That's usually the two that we would have to hire under, and it is very hard to find a BCBA that has both certifications. And then as far as paraeducators go, I know we are working amongst ourselves to find them. I know you mentioned the other contract, which I think is ESS or ECS, which does have in their contract hiring them after a year. It is something that I could go back to them and talk about, but I know right now they have a no compete clause within the contract.
So
follow up, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, before you do that, but I do want to make a note of Ms. Brody's suggestion, and there is a model in place where, and I believe it is ESS, where there is a transition from temp to full-time FTE within the district. Sorry, Ms. Brody, please go ahead.
So when do these people fall off our radar? At the end of the school year? Like, we're doing this contract, but is it for the upcoming school year next year?
Yep. So the contracts are year to year. Yep. From July 1 to the June 30th. Some of them will sign back on with us if we need them, and some of them don't. And we end up having the companies find other people if we need them, if we haven't found our own.
Okay, if we don't have anything in place that's saying we can't seek those folks now, the online part that is hard to find the speech and language folks, that's one conversation. But these people who are in our schools physically that this temp agency found and we seem to not be able to find, we have to figure something out. And our backs up are not up against the wall in the sense of they're, the contract ends and they're gone June 1st sort of thing. I don't know if we need to hire somebody to find us talent. I don't know what we need to do, but this temping, this has to go. We need our own employees because I'm quite sure we're paying this temp agency to find us people. With that, we could save that money and get our own people, pay somebody a fee to be a headhunter or something. But this temping, this has to end. That's all I have.
Board Member Walker?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Ward, I'm actually going to ask about the para educators too. So we'll stay with that. In our upcoming budget, hang on just a second. I'm sorry, I got distracted. So in upcoming budget, we have on one hand, we're going to be reducing our para educators by 41, and then we're going to hire 45 special ed para educators. And I too was thinking, how do we do this because of this shortage? So my first question is this 45 special ed para educators that we're looking to hire, is that captive in the numbers that you're presenting? Because you said that these numbers are already allocated school-based staff.
Correct. Yep.
So
So we would, they're not in addition to what is in the budget when you talk about cuts. So if we don't need them because we have, we don't need them any longer because we have our own staff, which to Ms. Brody's point, then we wouldn't have 40. We could have 30, we could have 20, whatever it is to help fulfill those empty spaces.
So what I'm asking is, now that we've had this conversation, if we're losing 40, does that track to the ending of the ESS contract? We are ending that. And so what I'm trying to figure out here are there 40 people that are currently working for the district that we're going to terminate, although they're permanently working for us? Or is the 40 reduction kind of just a reaction to the ESS ending, and so we lose their staff, and the 45 we're picking up? I'm wondering, is it part of this number of 40 plus people that are in your contract?
I don't believe that it's because we're ending ESS because there's not very many paras that are hired currently through them. This number is just to help us to be able to ensure that we have all of the staff that we need. So like, again, if we cut and everyone bumps down and we're able to fill positions, then we may not need them. And if we need 5 of them, we would be able to use this contract to fill 5 positions.
Oh, okay. So quickly, all right. So this contract is a not to exceed, in this case, like stepping stone. You can hire up to 40. You're saying you're not guaranteeing that you can hire 40, but you have access to hire up to 40.
100% correct. Yep.
Okay. So, okay. I got you. It clarifies it. So, so Mr. Chair, I guess other questions I have, I'm going to kind of save to our budget discussion to try to figure out, to Ms. Brody's point, if we're really going to be able to get these numbers in-house ourselves and not need these contract folks. So I'll end my comment there at this point.
I'd like to point out that all of the contracts besides all of the contracts are the same way. So if we don't need 19 speech and language pathologists from Stepping Stone and we only need 5, then that's all we would take from them. So they're all up to, but not to exceed. I apologize if that wasn't clear before.
Yeah, that's clear, but I think it still begs the question to Ms. Brody's point of that glide path as full-time FTEs or whatever, just employees of the district, which is a more sustainable model. And again, right, I know Stepping Stone's local here to Hartford. I've used them and know them. So to the point that Ms. Brody made, how are they able to recruit their FTEs and we're still struggling. Now, one of the things I do want to mention to my colleagues is while you look at this number here, I do want to note that benefits are not being paid, if I'm reading this correctly, right? So that is, if we were to move in that direction, that would be an added expense to the district if we were to recruit them. Now, there has to be some type of cost benefit analysis done. But I think it's certainly worth the discussion of how do we, again, not rely on other folks or other organizations to help solve our needs. Seeing if there's any additional questions or comments from my colleagues. All right, seeing none, again, Ms. Ward, I think you have some homework assignments in terms of understanding a more sustainable model. And rest assured that this would be a conversation that takes place in future meetings.
Great, thank you guys.
Ms. Santiago?
We now have the Increasing Educator Diversity Plan, and we have Dr. Curtis on the call. And I will stop screen sharing, Dr. Curtis, so you can share.
Okay, let me share my screen. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Let me get our okay, is it still the, I'm sorry, is it still the deck that you can see, Board Member Rigger?
Yes, I can see the deck.
Okay, thank you. So this is going to be a few slides, so I'm going to try to get through all of them quickly. If I'm talking too fast, please let me know. So this is the presentation for the Increasing Diversity Educator Plan. This is the language that the state put out, and essentially what the state has required is that no later than March 15th, each local and regional Board of Education must submit an Increasing Educator Diversity Plan. We got an extension until April 15th. This plan must be approved by our board and accepted by the state. And once it is, then it must be on our website and on the State Board of Education website. So an overview of this process, the purpose of the IED plan is to, of course, diversify the educator pipeline in Hartford to increase the recruitment, hiring, and retention of educators of color. And through the presentation, we'll call this subset of educators BIPOC. So the process we went through was the Office of Talent Management invited stakeholders from across the district to serve on the guiding committee and or the subcommittees for recruitment, selection and hiring, and retention. And so the overall payoff for this plan would be that we would develop a sustainable plan that would allow us to be in compliance, but also be reflective of the needs of the BIPOC educators in our district. So as part of the plan, we listed our vision. We always had this vision that we acknowledge that there are systems of injustice that exist in our nation and our community, and that we're committed to addressing systemic barriers to create a culture of equity that benefits all students. And we're committed to recruiting, developing, and retaining a diverse team of culturally competent educators. Part of the plan also is to indicate our theory of action, which is if we improve employment, recruitment, onboarding, retention, practices, development, leadership, and recognition with a lens of equity, then we'll build a diverse workforce that is representative of our students and community. As part of this plan, we looked at a ton of data just to make sure that as we develop our goals, we track our goals against what our data is telling us in our district. So here's our data as compared to the state. So you will see that Hartford Public Schools, in terms of the diversity of our staff, we've always outperformed the state in this area, but we have a huge gap between our educators of color and our students of color. This piece of data just shows where the concentration of educators of color are in our district. And the majority of our educators of color, when we say educators, we're talking about certified, non-certified, bargaining, non-bargaining. Every employee in the district we consider an educator. And so our most diverse group of educators, of course, are our non-instructional support staff. This tends to be the people who live in our community, our paras, our cafeteria staff. So that group of educators tends to be our most diverse staff. And then we looked at data sets regarding our new teachers. How many of them do we recruit and hire that identify as educators of color? And then we looked at attrition, BIPOC attrition. So we looked at all attrition across all the employees in the district. And then we broke that down to only looking at HFT and then looking at HPSA also. So all of this data helped us create our goals in our focus areas. So the state breaks the plan down into 3 different areas. And so for recruitment, our goal is to increase the percentage of BIPOC teacher candidates recruited and available for consideration by hiring managers by 5%. And for the hiring and selection part of the plan, the goal is to ensure accuracy of candidate lifecycle data so that greater than 85% of our candidates are in the correct NIMBLE status. And then for retention is to increase the retention of BIPOC educators by 10%. And so this is a snapshot. This is exactly what the plan looks like. So this is a snapshot. I'll just read some of the highlights here from the recruitment. So after looking at all the data, the recruitment subcommittee's key observation was the district hires more new BIPOC teachers to HPS than we have overall in the district. So the goal is to increase the percentage of BIPOC teacher candidates recruited and available for consideration by hiring managers by 5%. And the way in which they'll do that is to develop a structure for BIPOC educators to meet and create community across the district as a way to attract candidates and retain current staff. So this would be include hosting BIPOC events, using HPS staff as ambassadors, partnering with district-wide affinity groups for BIPOC educators, collaborating with retention subcommittees to survey our current BIPOC educators to learn why they choose HPS and what keeps them here. So the plan requires us also to look at resources, risk mitigation, and communication. So for this part of the plan, it would require funding to help support the extra duty, food, logistics to support the events for BIPOC educators. It would require facilitators to lead the affinity groups and support personnel for the logistics and preparation. The risk, of course, is that right now we're in a budget deficit. There are a lot of cuts and we're on a tight budget. And then also the district's reputation for position eliminations and non-competitive salaries. So that'll be something that we'll have to create messaging around just to get over that hurdle. And then let me move on to hiring and selection. And so the goal of this subcommittee was to ensure the accuracy of candidate lifecycle data collection so that greater than 85% of candidates are in the correct NIMBLE cycle. So essentially, really looking at our applicant tracking system in a way where all hiring managers understand the importance of moving candidates correctly through the cycle so that we can get cleaner data around where our applicants are in the cycle and where we lose them in the cycle. So the key strategies would be to provide ongoing training to hiring managers and administrators. And so the training would be at different levels throughout the organization and throughout the school year by cohorts, individuals, admin teams, and then to develop a best practice talent guidebook for hiring managers as well. We would monitor the progress of this on a quarterly basis. And then the risk for this is the inconsistency with the training. So there just has to be really aligned training to the needs of the hiring managers so that they understand. This is what came out of the subcommittee, is that hiring managers have to really understand the why behind all the different pieces of the applicant tracking system so that they would better implement the process. And then for retention, the retention committee wants to increase the retention of BIPOC educators by 10%, but also have more than 80% of BIPOC educators indicating that they feel a sense of community and belonging in Hartford Public Schools. So some of the strategies here would be to create a framework for mentorship specifically for BIPOC educators and to provide BIPOC mentors for BIPOC educators. So people who identify as educators of color actually mentoring the educators who identify as people of color, and then creating space and opportunity where BIPOC educators can see themselves and be themselves. So part of this, a lot of the conversation in this group was that oftentimes educators of color in the district can't show up as their authentic self. So providing space and opportunity for BIPOC educators just to be able to see folks across the district, have events where we have a concentration of BIPOC educators together where they can be celebrated and where they can network with each other. Another strategy is to prioritize capturing exit survey data from BIPOC educators who separate from the district so we can understand better why we're losing educators of color, and specifically if it's aligned to them not feeling connected to the district. So some of the risks here would be, again, the budget deficit, because we need money and people to lift this work. And then this idea that even though we have mentors and mentors of color, mentors can still harm people, right? Because if they don't know what they're doing, if they don't know how to lift the support, then they can cause harm as well. So some of the mitigation is just to make sure that we provide really good training for mentorship and that we support mentors as well throughout this process. So here are the members who were part of the guiding committee and the subcommittee. So we had a really good representation across the district, and we had 3 board members, Board Member Rigger, Board Member Johnson, and Board Member Brody participated. So they were able to provide insight as well. And here are the resources that we used for the for creating the plan.
Thank you. Looking to my screen to see if there are any questions or comments for Chief Curtis. Board Member Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief Curtis, I'm going to start with the end, the exit interview. the last time you presented to us the status of the work of OTM, you didn't have exit interview data. I think it was a significant miss. We really need to close on that. The other thing that seemed to be missing here is really having an inclusion within that school-based leadership. I mean, for as much as mentoring, I think is important for teachers, most people stay or leave based on their relationship with their manager. And so that's not going to be their mentor. It's probably going to be supervisory teacher, their principal. And so I don't know how tied in they are with this. And I would just say that that's an area that I also would look to be really healthy, and it just wasn't mentioned in your presentation. So those are my two comments, but certainly exit data is to be expected moving forward. And then really let's look at climate and culture at the school as it relates to these individual teachers. And I don't think we can really know that without the exit data or without some other kind of data from existing candidates.
Board Member Ricker, can I respond to that comment?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Board Member Walker. I smiled a little bit because I was trying to rush through the presentation for the sake of time, but part of the, and you'll have access to the plan itself. Part of the plan is communication. You're absolutely right. In the communication plan for retention, one of the stakeholder groups that has to have really tightly aligned communication is school-based leadership and district-based leadership. So having a level of buy-in at both of those levels for this process.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments for Chief Curtis?
I have a quick question around it was a point where we labeled everyone an educator, I believe. Could I get some more clarification on that statement?
Yes, thank you, Board Member Brody. Yes, so even in the PDEC committee, the Professional Development and Evaluation Committee, right now the state, as it looks to realign the process for evaluation, everyone needs to be evaluated. But typically when we think about evaluations, we only think of teachers, right? And administrators and paras. But if we call employees educators, because every role in the system typically touches a student, particularly those individuals in schools, certified, non-certified. If we refer to everyone as educators, then we don't make a distinction between like who should be evaluated, who doesn't get evaluated, who has access to this, if we call everyone educators, then we're not placing any emphasis on any type of hierarchy in terms of our employees, particularly around structures that are designed to support individuals like this increasing educator diversity plan. So it's not necessarily just to increase teachers of color, but everyone in the district.
Follow-up, Chair?
Absolutely.
So is it a certain, is the state definitely looking for a number on a teacher, even though we're saying an educator, everyone? I totally am in agreement with it makes a difference for our children to see themselves in many different positions at their school. Totally on board with that. We have some security officers who are in some some parts of the day more valuable than other staff members because of what they allowed the student to overcome to be able to be educated, right? So I totally get that. And they need to see themselves, but are we specifically in certain parts saying they want the absolute number of a teacher versus an educator in regards to this report?
No, we weren't given that directive, but I showed data sets that showed well, the data set that I showed that had every staff member listed in the district, and I said the non-certified staff tend to have the highest level of diversity. That was a chart that the state asked us to fill out and to examine that data set. So the state really does want us to examine all positions in our district, but we also know that this IED plan is really has a high influence on hiring managers as well, like Board Member Walker suggested. Principals in schools, school leadership need to understand, because those are the folks making the decisions about teachers, right? So for the subcommittee that looks at selection and hiring, that's why their focus was on the hiring manager, because if we can influence the decisions of the hiring manager by guiding them through the process of the applicant tracking system and showing them where our applicants of color are entering the applicant pool and then falling out and not becoming hires, then hopefully that will increase the actual number of teachers that we have of color in classrooms in schools.
Thank you.
I'm seeing if there's any other questions from my colleagues. Okay, seeing none. Ms. Santiago, can we get a time check?
Yes, we are 2 minutes ahead of the meeting ending at 6 p.m.
Are there any additional agenda items? I think the only thing remaining are reports, which again are there for could be there for consumption. Are there any other agenda items?
Nope, that is it. Sorry, I did not. Let me share the screen again, but nope, that is all we have for today.
All right. I think again, I appreciate the lively discussion. I think there were some agenda items where I guess the staff will go back and follow up with the board. I know one in particular was around the staffing, right? Temporary staffing. Another one was around Juneteenth, the proposal that would be brought back to the board. The conversation between right school versus district holiday. I think the board made it clear of where we want to be. And then any other items that I may have forgotten. But I appreciate everyone's time, and I call this meeting to a closure. Have a good night.